Investing into Sword Soul back in May of 2022 is the Master Duel equivalent of buying Bitcoin at its lowest, because your investment has simply multiplied time and time again, and this is no exception. This is Sword Souls at the end of 2023, over a year and a half later, still kicking. And not only are they kicking, it feels really good right now. I am absolutely loving this. This list carried me up to Diamond 1 very, very easily. I'm still playing it, and this is more than likely the list that will get me the Masters. I'm having a fucking blast playing this. What have we actually changed? What's new to the table? Well, today we're going to be playing Ringowurm, the Dragon Guarding the 100 Apples. Again, this is a big staple for, we covered it before in our Sprite Bestial Synchro deck, but this holds a place in quite a number of various different Synchro decks, and this one is no exception. So what is the idea behind it in this? Well, using Ringowurm, the Dragon Guarding the 100 Apples, it essentially opens up a whole bunch of different combo lines for, later down your combo. But one of my favorite interactions is the fact that it allows you to set up a Baron before 5 summons way more consistently. So if you have, for example, let's say your Mo Yi and your Dragon Guarding the 100 Apples in your hand, you summon your Mo Yi, summon out your token, whatever, right? So 1, 2, summon 3, 3 summon is your Grandmaster, right? So you summon 3 times in the Grandmaster. If you special summon Ringowurm, right? That's summon number 4. And then Ringowurm and your Grandmaster go into Baron. There's 5 summons, and now your Baron is up. You're safe from Nibiru. Nibiru was one of the biggest issues for this deck, because basically the deck prior to this would have taken 6 summons to get to your Baron. You would have had to do Mo Yi token, Grandmaster, Strategist token, then Baron, right? 6 summons. So if they hit you on your Strategist token, you're done, right? Nibiru cukes you, it's game over. Move on, right? Pick up your deck, leave. Now you have another way of countering it, other than just, of course, raw drawing the Strategist, which also works. So I'm really excited about that. It also opens up a ton of extra doors. For example, around your Tri-Edge Master, it opens up. It grants you additional access to a bunch of level 8s. It means that now you're able to put up boards that have 3 or 4 level 8s or 2 to 3 level 10s. And it really is just very interesting how it changes the playstyle of the deck and just opens up a lot of doors. You can get away with playing 1 copy of it. I do like 2. I do like seeing it in my opening hand. I don't want to see multiple copies though. And in game number 1, you're going to see a game where we have multiple copies. But that's, again, it's a-okay. As long as you've got a normal summon, you can make it work. But other than that, Sword Soul is still just doing Sword Soul things. It is still as powerful as it's always been, and it is still an absolute blast to play. I will be doing a deck profile at the end of the video for those of us who maybe aren't familiar with Sword Soul. A lot of newer players probably don't even know really how this deck works, so I'm going to be covering that one off towards the end of the video. But first, I've got 4 replays lined up for us to enjoy. So if you're interested in this style of content or anything else that we do on the channel, of course, you can subscribe to catch our content as it comes out daily, every single day. If you want to catch it, button's right there. It doesn't cost you anything. It's absolutely free. And you can like the video if you actually enjoy watching. Without further ado, let's get into game number 1. Alright, getting into game 1, here we are going second, and we're going second against Labyrinth of all decks. This is normally quite a detrimental matchup, and it is definitely not an easy one. They got the Chandelier and the Coup Clock in their opening hand. Coup Clock coming out the field, so they can proc the big welcome that they just set directly from deck, bringing out, of course, the lovely Labyrinth, bouncing back the clock and a pop a card in our hand. Luckily for us, what they're going to do is they're going to activate Chandelier here as well, and then they're going to pop in our hand one of our Ringowurms. So that is perfectly fine, right? They're going to pop a Ringowurm, 1 goes to grave, so now we've got 4 cards in hand, but the 4 cards we have in hand are still pretty good, right? So that's okay. They're going to set a card back to their field. Now they have the clock, they have the Chandelier, and they have Maxi, and they also have the big welcome, right? So they're actually really set. Their field looks barren, but think about what they have at their disposal. They have the pop off the lovely. They have the summon of the lady to set another trap from deck. They have the Coup Clock, so they can use that trap from deck. They have the Maxi. They have all of these crazy resources that they can use directly from hand and deck. So we're in a lot of trouble here. Luckily, we draw into a Mo Yi. Perfect top deck. Again, it's hard to dissuade the fact that the top deck definitely helps here. We would have had some plays otherwise, but not a ton, if I'm going to be honest. So we are going to banish the Maxi, of course. Then we're going to negate it into the main phase 1. We're going to start with Ashuna. This is then we're going to link someone off in the Monk of the TENYI. The idea here is that Monk of the TENYI is a non-effect monster, which means you can utilize all the additional effects, of course, of this. You can special summon this card out to the field. Very useful. Now, before we get that far, our opponent decides they're going to go fucking ham, right? they decide to go Operation fucking Scorched Earth. They're not allowing us to have anything. Sending the Chandelier and the Coup Clock from their Hand to the Grave, setting Welcome Labyrinth to the field. Using the Coup Clock, they're going to summon itself back to the field. Welcome Labyrinth, going to summon Ariana directly from the deck. They're going to grab the Lady Labyrinth directly from their deck to hand, special summoning the Lady Labyrinth out to the field. Now they're going to use Big Welcome. They're going to use Big Welcome and enchain their Lady Labyrinth at the Silver Castle, setting a trap card directly from their deck to the field, setting the Karyuma Cannon, and then using Big Welcome, summoning out Ariana, bouncing back the clock so they can use a lovely Labyrinth's effect to pop an additional card either on our field or in our hand, using Ariana's effect to draw one, Chandelier adding back to hand. Crazy amount of advantage being generated by SWORDSOUL here, or sorry, by Labyrinth here, and we are going to have to play through it. If we can't finish him off this turn, chances are we're going to be in for a bit of a grind. So we're going to start with Moyi here, revealing the Proto, summoning out a token. Now we're going to special summon out the Ringowurm while we have the non-effect monster on board, going into, of course, our Grand Master. And this is exactly what I was talking about before. We're currently up, well, sorry, with this combo in particular anyways, we of course summoned Ashuna Monk in the past, but that's fine. Summoning out these guys, searching for strategists, drawing into the spell card, which is great. Baron now coming out. Baron gonna pop the lovely Labyrinth. Of course, he cannot use this face down card this turn, so I'm not overly concerned about it. I would rather be rid of Lovely. We're going to use the Ringowurm in the grave, special summoning out another token, which can be used as a tuner or non-tuner as we see fit. Summoning Shifana from deck, we're going to drop the Emergence, summoning out Strategist and another token. Synchro summoning into Boxia, Brightness of the Yangzing. Now, the reason we're doing this, we can bounce that trap card back to the deck with no face down card. Lady Labyrinth loses her protection. So now we're going to use these two to go into Supreme Sovereign Cheng Ying. We're now going to special summon out Protos. That triggers Cheng Ying. We're going to banish the Lady and banish the Big Welcome from grave. Using Protos, call Dark, wipe the board into the battle phase, swinging for game. Now that is pretty fucking cool. Feels really great sometimes. Again, just replays like that just remind you about how great this deck is. This came out in May of 2022. This is over a year and a half old, and it is still cooking some of the best decks in the entire game of Master Duel. So you know what? It's hard to be upset. Let's get into another matchup here, which I think is also pretty damn funny. Already getting into game 2 here. Now, SWORDSOUL has a bit of a love-hate relationship when it comes to stun, right? Of course, just like any deck, you can get totally locked out of playing the game. It can happen. However, there's a lot of the typical stun-based strategies that SWORDSOUL can unironically play around. So we're going to start this time up against, of course, Inspector Border, Fountain, face down card, must be a floodgate, right? Because our opponent controls a monster and we don't, we can special summon the Ecclesia. We're going to normal summon Moyi with no effect. That's a tuner and a non-tuner, enabling us to go into Ryzen Dragite. That allows us to play into our opponent. They're flipping up Synchro Zone. I don't give a shit. I control Synchro Monsters. What are you going to do about it? And now we have one monster effect activation this turn to play around with. So we're going to swing in, take out the Inspector Border. So even if he had tried something while the Inspector Border was up, we would have been able to negate it, which would have been useful. He goes for Freezing Curses here. We're going to negate the Freezing Curses, of course, using Dragite's effect. Dragite then, of course, negating the activation of a spell or trap so long as we have a water and grave. We're going to summon out the Strategist here. They're going to use now the second runic spell in hand, which is Dispelling. They're going to summon out what's this one's name? Immunion. They're going to draw 2, shuffling back 2, going Runic Tip. Runic Tip going to grab them the Flashing Fire. Flashing Fire, of course, then activating the pop of Special Summon Monster on the field. And they choose the token, which is a solid enough choice. Yeah. We're going to go Dragite, seeing if we can't hit a rock from our deck. Of course, we don't because we only play a 1, but that's fine. It's worth the try, right? It's funny when it works. It's not when it's not. It is just that easy. We are going to pass back to our opponent here. Dragite does make me fairly confident that we're going to be able to weather whatever storm our opponent throws at us here. They're going to grab a Rivalry of Warlords here, which they're expecting to pretty much shut us down. Union then going to give them an additional 1,000 life points. They're healing over time, which is going to be a slight problem, but it's fine. We can manage. We are going to go Ryzen Dragite, revealing the top 5 of the deck, and we actually hit the nib. Using the nib, sending Fountain back to hand for now, just so it's one less thing for us to deal with. We're going to discard the Proto, summoning a Strategist. They're going to flip up Rivalry of Warlords. We're going to respond with the Dragite. They're going to respond to Dragite with Grave of the Super Ancient Organism, which would prevent us from using the effects of level 6 or higher monsters. Unfortunately for them, they're stupid and they flipped it up after Dragite. Again, I suppose the perspective would have been a case if they didn't want us to negate that card. So maybe they value that over their Rivalry, which, you know, fair enough. I guess that they're both really powerful floodgates. We're going to go with Shuna here from deck, though. We do have the counterplay in hand. We're going to go Vishuda, Synchro Summon off into the Chengying, of course. Now we're going to inflict 1200 points damage, linking off into Monk of the TENYI here off of our Vishuda. Vishuda banishing itself from the graveyard to bounce the Super Ancient Organism back to hand, allowing Chengying to resolve, banishing the Munin and the card from his graveyard, and then we just swing, swing, swing. Easy dubs, right? So that is that. Again, the variety of tools that SWORDSOUL has available to it is what makes this so powerful and what makes it such a force to be reckoned with, especially in matchups like Stun, right? Because the whole point of Stun is that they prevent the usage of generic strategies, right? They shut down generic conditions and summoning conditions and things that players would normally do. So if you start playing things that are not generic and not as easy to shut down, then decks like Stun have a much harder time dealing with you. Is it impossible for them to deal with you? No. It is still not a favorable matchup because Stun is typically just not a favorable matchup for most combo-based strategies. However, SWORDSOUL, more than most, has the tools to play around with or play through Stun-based decks. So I just wanted to show that off briefly. I thought it was really cool. Let's get into Game 3. Of course, the Gamma special here, opening up Driver. Now, again, as much as Gamma can be a little bit annoying in that regard, you have to play the break in the Driver. I definitely feel like Gamma adds a lot to this deck, and there's a lot of games that I've only won because of Gamma. You have a lot of things in this deck that totally sort of bait out Maxis, bait out Ash Blossoms. Like Ecclesia is the perfect example. People love waiting until you use Ecclesia's effect to hit you with Maxi, then love hitting that thing with an Ash Blossom. So being able to summon the Ecclesia and wipe your own field clean then to summon out another monster from deck is the perfect opportunity to use Gamma, and that is exactly what we're banking on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a second Gamma, which is pretty annoying, but it's fine. What are you going to do about it? Summon out the Ecclesia. They're going to go for Razem. We're going to tribute off the Ecclesia here just to see if they do anything about it. And there is the Ash Blossom that we were waiting on. We're going to go for the Cyframe Gamma here. Gamma then going to negate the Ash so that our Ecclesia will resolve, as well summoning itself and the Driver out from the hand. A little bit annoying that we opened Driver, but what are you going to do? Cry about it? We're going to summon out Taya from the deck. We did have a Worm in hand to reveal, so there's no point summoning out our Mo Yi. Taya may grant us additional benefits in the long run here. They're going to reveal enough cards to pop our Taya. That was a little bit of a... I shouldn't have summoned it here, okay? Alright, I can see you typing your comment. Keep your comment to yourself. I fucking know I shouldn't have summoned it there. Fight me, right? It is what it is. So they're going to bounce that back to hand. Going into Caesar Valius, they're really blowing their load here, really trying to stop us from Synchro summoning here. They're going to reveal Fire, Earth, and Dark to pop an additional card in the field. They're going to get rid of the Gamma, which is the token. Now they're going for the Zhao Long, summoning Zhao Long to the field. Luckily, we got Ringo. Ringo going to special summon itself, going into the Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend. They're going to go DD Crow to wipe out our Ringowurm. That's totally fine. I'm going to use the Red Dragon Archfiend to wipe the board clean. Anything with 3,000 or less attack points gets destroyed, and my opponent takes 500 points of damage for each card in question, wiping out the entire field. He did switch us to defense, so we can't attack, but you know what? That is something at the very least. We clawed back a little bit of advantage here. They're going to go Pantera and Razem from hand here. Razem searching for another Caesar Valius. It's going to be a super tough matchup to outgrind Vanquish Soul here. Again, tier 1 deck, best deck in the game right now. They're going to go for Rock of the Vanquish, bringing back the Zhao Long. They're going to go Razem, then Razem revealing the Zhao Long and the Super Heavy Burger. Unfortunately, dealing with our Red Dragon Archfiend. We're not going to go Gamma in response to the Zhao Long. We're going to negate and destroy it. Again, we were sort of waiting on that target. Him in particular is a big threat. Popping the Zhao Long, which suits me perfectly. They're going to go Caesar Valius here one more time, bouncing back the Razem, summoning itself out to the field. They're not going to go Battle Phase, taking out the Gamma one more time, of course. They're going to now be in Phase 2. Using the Burger, bouncing back the Caesar, using Burger's effect. They're going to reveal an Earth and a Fire to inflict 1,500 points of damage. They're going to try getting that burn in so they can gradually wear us down. We do lose the Gamma thanks to, the Driver thanks to Gamma's effect. And unfortunately, a top deck of an Imperm does sort of dampening our feelings a little bit. The only real top deck that we could have drawn there that would have been super useful would either have been like a Protoss or a Taya or something like that. There wasn't a ton of great cards we could have opened up with. They're going to go Razem, we're going to go Imperm, they're going to go Caesar Valius. Of course, again, we sort of saw this coming. At this stage, I had kind of sort of just accepted that the game was over. But again, I wanted to give the guy his dub. He earned it. We played through quite a lot. He put up a really good fight, so I didn't want to surrender on him. I wanted to give him his dub, and there we have it. So, putting up a decent fight against Vanquished Soul, considering the state of our hand, opening up 2 Gammas and a Driver in your opening hand. I think despite that, we put up a really good fight. However, Vanquished Soul is definitely not an opponent to be taken lightly, but it shows off a little bit more of the Ringowurm, shows off some of the tech options from the extra deck, shows off the value of Gamma in a lot of situations. So you know what, I'm happy enough how that turned out. That's why I wanted to show it off, even if we ended up taking an L in the end. Alright, now getting into another pseudo-stun matchup here. There's actually quite a lot of these running around. This guy's using a Springgan engine to get easy access to some stun-based cards, basically. Bringing out the Sargas, going to get milling again. They're just going to go through a whole combo here. This is not unlike the Springgan videos that we made, although our Springgan list was admittedly A, more powerful, and B, less toxic. Could you call it less toxic? I don't know. Borreload Colossus is pretty fucking toxic, so maybe, who knows? Maybe we're not that much better than him. But ultimately, our opponent's objective here, let me just summarize their whole turn, is Gallant into the Dyna, right? That's basically it, right? That was the turn. That was it. I guess they have some additional interruption. They want to set up like a Sargas, or they want to do shift from hand, whatever. It must just not have worked out for them. But this is their end board, right? Nothing too impressive, nothing too fancy. Normal summon Moyi, beat their fucking ass, and just like that, it is open season for this asshole. We're going to special summon out Ecclesia using, if I could speak English words, please. Using its effect, of course, being met with an Ash Blossom. Damn, what is wrong with me? Called by the Grave, negating the Ash Blossom from the graveyard, of course, banishing it there away. So our Ecclesia will, in fact, resolve summoning out. We could summon Taya here, potentially. Yeah, we ended up going for Taya. Yeah, we're going to use the strategist, drop in the Moyi, going to summon itself in a token. We're now going to use the SWORDSOUL Moyi and the token to go in the Grandmaster. Grandmaster get searching, Moyi get drawing. Again, typical +2 shenanigans, pot of greed on steroids. Drawing into Nibiru, the Primal Being, which is awesome. SWORDSOUL Emergence is what we choose to search. There's nothing else really super useful to search. Banishing Moyi, summoning another token. Going to use the Strategist and the token for our Baron. 1200 points of damage. Baron then popping the Gallant Granite. And we pop the Gallant Granite because we want to use Emergence to win the Protoss here. And Protoss will be able to special summon itself and declare Fire. Most of the Springgan monsters are Fire attribute, which means that he cannot special summon any of his goddamn monsters because they're all Fire. He realizes that, and that is it. Protoss is not just anti-dark, let me make that clear. A lot of the time you call dark because of how the card works. However, you can outright counterdeck your opponent if you're going second, even into the likes of the baby stun, would you call it? I don't know, it was pretty shitty for a stun deck. I would imagine he wanted to put up a couple of additional interruptions. It just didn't work out for him, but I just wanted to show off one last match because why not, right? Good stuff all around into the deck profile. Alright, and here we have it. So this is the actual deck. Now there's quite a lot of room for flex and ratio manipulation and things like that in this deck. And one of the big perks of the deck is that you do get to play quite a handful of non-engine cards, right? So let's go through the non-engine first. We of course have our Gamma. Gamma really, really good in this. So long as Kashtira is around, people are going to be shotgunning Maxis and standby. People really want to use Maxi or Ash in response to your Ecclesia. Your Emergence beats a lot of Ash Blossoms because if you don't have anything on board and you use Emergence to search for Moyi, well, a lot of people know, more experienced players anyway, know that there's only really 2 points in a SWORDSOUL combo where you'll Ash them. You will either Ash their Emergence or you Ash their Ecclesia. If they go for Emergence first, they typically don't have Ecclesia. So people are very inclined to Ash the Emergence, at least those of us who know what we're doing. And that is yet again another perfect piece of bait for the Gamma. So Gamma's really, really good in this list. You do occasionally open up the driver. You do occasionally have a Gamma in hand that you end up not using. However, I think that insurance against Maxi and the insurance against Ash Blossom is still so valuable that it's very hard for me to justify not having it in the deck, especially considering it facilitates basically any level 8 synchro of your choosing, right? It works perfectly with Ringo as well because it summons out a non-effect monster to the board. It's perfect, right? It just adds up. Everything about Gamma just makes sense in this deck. So I play it. You don't have to. I know a lot of people would rather die than put Cypher and Driver in their deck. And you know what? RIP Bozo. But it's just something that I apply, right? We have the Veiler because it's really good target, of course, really strong card. And it's a really good crossout target. People do be playing Veiler in these parts. We got that triple maximum sheesh on deck, triple ash blossom as per standard. We've got the called by single crossout and the one infinite impermanence, again as a really good card, as well as a crossout target. And last but not least, the Nibiru, the Primal Being, which is actually multifaceted in this deck. Number one, of course, really good card to draw off a Max C. Really helps punish a lot of decks that decide they want to play in the Max C challenge. A lot of people, I've sort of realized that a lot of people in this meta are sort of confident in taking the Max C challenge because we're not playing enough cards to punish them, right? Evenly is not popular enough. We're not running enough Lightning Storms, we're not running enough Nibiru, and because of that, people are getting kind of cocky with the Max C challenge, so we're going to have to put them back in their place. We're going to have to start throwing the rocks at them, basically. So not only is it a really good interruption to drop Max C, it's a really good crossout target, of course, right? You want to cross out Nib if your opponent's going to hit you with it, even though in this deck it's typically not as much of a problem. And lastly, then it's a rock, right? A rock is kind of important because that means you can go fishing through your deck using Drag Out, which checks the top 5 cards of your deck for a rock, and if you happen to hit rocks, you can bounce opponent's cards back to hand up to the number of ones that you hit. So even just hitting out one card off a Drag Out is really cool. We're only running the one copy, so it doesn't happen every single time, but because you're revealing 5 cards is a lot of cards, right? There's a decent enough chance, even at one copy, that you're going to hit it, especially considering, right, you're at 40 cards, 35 at start of turn, and then you're going to take like at least 3 to 4-ish cards out of that deck before you even contemplate a Drag Out mill run. So it's not as if like your odds are 0, right? So it does genuinely come up sometimes. But yeah, technically it's a flex spot. That leaves you with 15 cards, 15 spots, even in just this list that you can do whatever you want with. There are ways of generating more space if you want to play more engine there instead. Absolutely, you can never go wrong with too much engine. If you really want to. I think that this is the sort of the perfect ratios in my opinion. I don't really have any problems. I see them when I need to see them. I don't when I don't. It all kind of works out. Sometimes I wish I were maybe playing 1 or 2 additional worms or 1 or 2 additional Sword Soul targets. So if you wanted to bump it up slightly, I would get it. But I'm very confident with where I have my ratios at on this list. So there we go. That's all the flex spots. Let's talk about the actual deck itself. So the deck itself, of course, is separated. Again, I'll do this deck list the way I've done all my previous Sword Soul deck lists, separated into 2 main parts. We have Sword Soul, and we have TENYI, and then the Ringowurm finds himself somewhere in the middle. So let's talk about Sword Soul first. So we have the 3 big Sword Soul boss monsters, or engine monsters, I suppose. We got Mo Yi, we've got Taya, we've got the Strategist. All 3 summon out Sword Soul tokens. A Sword Soul token is a level 4 non-effect token that is a tuner, right? So that's where you're getting your tuners from. And they all do it under different circumstances, and they all also have an effect that activates when they're used to synchro material. So Mo Yi, on summon, will reveal a Sword Soul or Worm in hand to summon its token, and if used as synchro material, will draw a card. Taya, as an ignition effect, can banish a Worm or Sword Soul card from grave to summon its token, and if it's used as synchro material, you send a Worm card from deck to grave. Strategist is slightly different. This card in hand will discard a Worm or Sword Soul card to special summon itself and a token, and if used as synchro material, you then inflict 1200 points of damage to your opponent, which is some nice burn. The deck does a little bit of burning here and there with your, of course, your Strategist, your Sinister Sovereign, even your Red Dragon Archfiend to an extent. So, you know, there's some burn in there. It definitely does help generate lethal. So those are your 3 primary Sword Soul cards, and they're basically just 1 card synchros, right? You also have Ecclesia here. The Incredible Ecclesia, the Virtuous, will special summon itself to the field if your opponent controls more monsters than you. As a level 4 tuner monster, that is exceptionally useful, and it's really useful, especially going second and into various stun matchups where you want to be able to synchro summon without actually activating any effects. So the Incredible Ecclesia is, as the name would suggest, incredible, not only for that reason, but also because it has the ability to quick effect tribute itself to special summon a Sword Soul monster directly from deck to field. Now that is, of course, exceptionally useful because you want to get additional access to things like your Mo Yi or Taya, very seldomly your Strategist, but technically possible if you really need a level 6, which, I mean, does come up, right? Let's not pretend that it's going to be an option 0% of the time. Sometimes you've got a Ringo on board and you just need a level 6 to do shit with it, right? Sometimes you've got a Sword Soul token and your primary monster was destroyed and you just need a level 6 on board to do some damage, right? There's a whole bunch of scenarios in which that can be useful. but typically speaking, it's going to be your Moyi and your Taya. So, Incredible Ecclesia, I think playing 3 of this, absolutely. I know a lot of people play this at 2. I personally think y'all are fucking nuts. I think this card is insane. I think it's invaluable going second. You want to see this card in your hand as much as you possibly can. Even if you end up not using it going first, it's just too valuable a tool going second to not have in your hand. And it is, of course, a 1-card starter if you open it up going first as well. So, there are a whole bunch of reasons as to why you would play it. If you don't want to play it at 3, to play it at 2. If you're playing it at 1, you're an actual sociopath, and I will throw hands. But playing it at 2 is fine. Playing it at 3, I think, is the way to go. And then we got the SWORDSOUL Emergence. SWORDSOUL Emergence will search your deck for a SWORDSOUL monster, or if you have a Synchro monster on board already, will search your deck for any worm monster, which is very valuable, because, you know, we're playing a couple of worms that one could deem a little bit more powerful than the rest. So because of that, Emergence, absolutely mandatory 3 of. Really good bait for a Gamma as well, which is solid. Good combo starter if you happen to not open any of your SWORDSOUL shit, and in an ideal circumstance, it helps you set up Protoss on your end board. Lastly then, SWORDSOUL Blackout. Blackout is a very powerful trap card. Basically allows you to pop a worm in your field to pop 2 cards on your opponent's field. It is very straightforward. If this card ever gets banished for one reason or another, you get to special summon a SWORDSOUL token directly from your directly to your field, which is fucking awesome, right? It's an additional token, and there are a plethora of ways for you to proc that effect. So Blackout is very, very solid. Getting into the Tenyis then. So the Tenyis work slightly differently, of course. They are all worm monsters, which is very important. The idea is you want to have, reveal, banish, or discard targets for your SWORDSOULs. The Tenyis fill that role by being worm monsters, and they also serve a bunch of unique benefits in and of themselves. First and foremost, we're playing 4. We're playing the double Adara, playing the 1 Shyvana, double Vishuda, and triple Ashuna. They all have one common effect, or sorry, 2 common effects really. Number 1, they can all special summon themselves to the field if you don't control any effect monsters. So if you have no monsters at all, or if your only monsters are tokens or the Monk of the Tenyi, then you can special summon these guys directly from hand to field. Pretty useful. Secondly, they all have an effect that you can use by banishing them from hand or graveyard if you control a non-effect monster, again, token or monk. So we're going to talk about those effects now, of course. Adara is unique among the Tenyi because it is a tuner. It is a level 1 tuner, which does on occasion come up and enable some synchro plays. Not super often, but it is technically something that can happen. So this guy basically banishes himself from hand to grave to return a banished worm back to your hand. Great for generating advantage, great for ensuring you have discards, great for recycling powerful monsters for turn 3 or turn 4. So yeah, Adara's banish sort of return effect is pretty awesome. Vishuda can banish itself from hand to grave to target a card in your opponent's field and bounce it back to hand. Really good spot removal, especially useful in stun matchups in my opinion. I think most of the time when this comes up is removing problematic floodgates, but it can just be more generically useful as well, of course. But it is especially useful and entirely invaluable in stun matchups. And finally, Ashuna then. Ashuna can banish itself to special summon a Tenyi monster from deck, but do be aware it does lock you in the worms for the rest of the turn. Now, why did I skip over Shyvana? Shyvana works slightly differently. So Shyvana's effect activates when a non-effect monster on your field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard. You then get to resummon that monster by banishing Shyvana, and then you get to pop a card on the field. Now, this card is useful for a myriad of reasons. Of course, that effect in and of itself is pretty damn good, right? It's pretty decent. Spot removal, and a lot of people don't fully read your cards, so they'll swing in and they'll just destroy your monk, or they'll destroy it by battle, or just pop it with an effect, not realizing that you have Shyvana laying in wait, and you get to bring back your monk and pop a card your opponent controls, and suddenly they're down massively, right? But more than that, it's also useful because of its level. It's a level 4. And it is one of the better among the level 4s because of its attribute as well. Being a water attribute monster means that it'll be more commonly applicable for the likes of your Dragite. It has a more powerful effect than the other level 4 Tenyis as well. The other ones are kind of mid. This one is actually kind of useful. And being able to just special summon this card out from your deck off of an Ashuna means that you can use it alongside a SWORDSOUL token or a myriad of other things, or even something like a Ringowurm to go into whatever it is you need to go into synchro-wise. So playing at least the 1 Shyvana is definitely key. It's just a really good card. I don't know why you wouldn't play it, right? And then into our fringe zone, the middle zone, the generic support, we have 2 cards. We have the double Ringowurm and the 1 Arch Nemesis Protoss. Now, Arch Nemesis Protoss requires no introduction to anyone who's been playing this card, this game longer than 2 weeks. Protoss basically can special summon itself on the field by banishing 3 monsters of different attributes from your field or grave, and once per turn can declare the attribute of a monster that is currently face up on the field. All monsters of that attribute are destroyed, and neither player can special summon monsters of that attribute until the end of the following turn. Normally what you're going to do is you're going to declare Dark. Why is that? Well, Protoss himself is Dark, and this card cannot be destroyed by card effects, so he will not be destroyed by his own field wiping effect, meaning that you can very safely declare Dark. None of your other end board pieces are Dark as well, so it's not going to negatively impact you at all, other than perhaps in the summoning of Draco Berserker or Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend, which, I mean, at that stage, if you're going into these cards on top of everything else, it's fucking GG's, right? Just go into a different synchro, you're gonna be fine. You'll live. So this card is nuts, right? This card is one of the big reasons as to why this deck is so successful. Going first, being able to lock your opponent out of playing any dark monsters at all. Cucks Labyrinth, it stops on a Rise Heart from coming out, it destroys Branded. There's a whole bunch of things that this just outright halts. And if you're going second, it's a free special summon as long as you have the matching grave, and it can declare the attribute of an opponent's monster as well, nuke their board of that attribute, and prevent it from reusing that as well. So if you're playing into I don't know, Naturia matchup, right? Well, declare Earth, and then they can't summon any of their Naturia shit, right? So there's a whole bunch of uses behind this card. It is really, really powerful. It's banned in the TCG, and I'm pretty sure the OCG as well. I'm not entirely sure there, though. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it's still legal in Master Duel, and it's here. Have fun with it. And then lastly, of course, we have our new support, the Ringowurm, the 100 apples guarding whatever, right? The fucking dork. So this guy is pretty sick, because he special summons himself out from the hand of the field if you control a non-effect monster. Which you will, because your entire deck is about either summoning tokens off of your Sword Souls or Monk of the Tenyi off of your Tenyis. So you're always going to have a non-effect monster, at least at some point during your turn. So Ringowurm, free summon. First of all, level 2 tuner, summons himself for free. Assault Synchron vibes, right? Assault Synchron's busted, why wouldn't this card be? Well, it also has a second effect. During a turn on which you have Synchro summoned, at any stage, right? You can banish this from the graveyard to summon a 100 apples token. That token is, yet again, a level 2. Now, what's important to know is the token is actually a worm, right? So even if you eschew to lock yourself for whatever reason, whenever you're playing, you can still use this card's effect to summon the 100 apples token because it's a worm, right? And this is basically a level 2 monster that can be treated as a tuner if you want it to be. So it's a level 2 monster that you can choose as to whether or not is a tuner. Invaluable for synchro climbing. If you want to, basically what you're typically going to do is use this whole combo to go into Baron, like I talked about right at the beginning and during game 1 of the gameplay. You're going to want to use this to enable a Baron, but this then enables later on your additional level 8 synchro monsters to become level 10s. It enables your tri-edge fucking dork over here to become a level 8 synchro. It enables so much. It really does. It's such a good card. It really is. That's the whole deck profile there for the main deck. Let's get into the extra deck. There's not too many sort of the hard and fast rules when it comes to the extra deck. There's a few cards that you must play and a bunch of cards that are totally optional. We'll talk about the ones that you have to play first. And you have to play 2 copies of the Grandmaster, right? You can get away with 1 if you're a heathen. If you can survive off of 1, by all means. Sure, whatever. Ideally you want to, because you want to be able to use this card as follow-up. It is going to be dealt with, and in this version in particular, you're using it as synchro material sometimes, so having a second one is very, very useful, but you can technically get away with 1 if you really want to. Also, on summon, you get to search your deck for a Sword Soul card. You can either add that card to your hand or banish it. Now, why would you ever banish it? The only real circumstance in which you're going to do that is, well, technically there's 2. Number 1, first and foremost, is Blackout. So if you really need a Sword Soul token on your board, you can go Blackout. And under what circumstances would that happen? Well, if you have Mo Yi and Strategist in hand, right? You normal summon the Mo Yi, it gets impermed, right? Now I just got a Mo Yi here. If you can summon Strategist, you can use the token from the Strategist summon and your Mo Yi to go into the Grandmaster. Grandmaster then banishes Blackout from the deck, and that gives you another token which you can now use with your strategist, and now you've got your Baron Grandmaster just like you otherwise would have if you didn't get Imperm. So it helps you play through Interruption in that regard, but 99% of the time you're just adding a card to hand, right? Let's be real. The only like circumstance under which the alternative may be useful is if you have like Adara Engrave and a non-effect on board, you can like, I don't know, banish a Moyi and then add it back to hand off of Adara. It's super cringe. I wouldn't worry about it. Technically something that can be done, but I've never personally done it. Most of the time, the only time you'll ever banish is for Blackout. Most of the time, what you're going to use is the add to hand effect to either grab an Emergence if you want to get access to your Protoss, or Strategist if you don't really have a use for Emergence or Protoss just yet. So if you already have Strategist, great, you're going to grab Emergence. If you don't have Strategist, you're going to grab Strategist. This guy's priority number one. As powerful as Protoss is, it can be a little difficult to summon unless you've resolved enough of your own cards, meaning you normally have to go Strategist first to even just have enough attributes engraved to banish to summon Protoss. So this guy's priority number one off your Grandmaster search. Emergence is a close second. Have to play Baron. Generic level 10, once while face up Omni Negate, you have to play it. It's a key part as to why Ringo is actually fucking useful in this deck. You have to play it. Cheng Ying seeing use in his own deck, of course, this card is fucking nuts. Boosts himself up and reduces all of your opponent's monsters by 100 attack and defense for every banished card. If it would be destroyed by a card effect, you can banish a card from your graveyard instead to protect him, which of course then will proc his next effect, where if a card is banished from the graveyards while this guy's face up, you can banish any card on your opponent's field and a card in their graveyard without targeting. Non-targeting banishment removal from grave and field is absolutely insane, considering the wild number of ways in which you can proc that through all of your Tenyis, through your Protoss, through your Grandmaster, through whatever, right? There's shitloads of way to proc that effect, and it's just super powerful. I have to play one copy of the Sinister Sovereign. Absolutely must do. This card is insane, especially in this modern metagame. And with this version of the deck, because you're no longer choosing between level 10s, if you play your cards right, you can have a Baron and a Sinister Sovereign, which is insane. So this guy's super great value because what he does is once per turn, when your opponent special summons a monster, you can banish that monster and do 1200 points of damage. Once per turn, when your opponent activates a spell or a trap, you can banish that spell or trap and do 1200 points of damage. So basically, double removal built in, plus a shitload of burn. 2400 burn is nothing to be scoffed at. And if he's on your field already and you synchro summon another worm, you get to draw an extra card, which makes him really good to have on your field going into turn 3. Or if you're able to even go into him early in your combo, which I wouldn't recommend, you can technically draw an extra card during your first turn. But for primarily, that's going to be like a turn 3 type effect where you want to get an extra card. But again, the double removal is just so big. And remember, I know the whole banishing a spell or trap may not be the most useful thing in the world for most cards, but a continuous spell or trap needs to be face up to resolve its effect. A field spell needs to be face up to resolve its effect. So if your opponent's playing a powerful field spell, which a lot of decks are, if your opponent's playing a powerful continuous spell or trap, which a lot of decks are, Branded Lost, the fucking Kashtira, whatever, Birth, right? All of these really powerful cards. My friend Pearly, Stray Street Pearly, like most decks are playing something that you can banish to get value off of, and then of course, banishing a monster is always going to be valuable. So this guy is insane. Really big ups to this guy right now, especially with the lack of board breakers. I think this guy is getting even better. And then you got to play the Double Monk. This guy purely to work alongside your Tenyis, giving you a non-effect monster for your Ringowurm. Yeah, purely just sort of like an engine, sort of enabler type card. And those are the cards that you absolutely beyond doubt must play. The cards that come closest then to that in terms of like their next two mandatories, and like you must play these like next if you have them, right? First and foremost would be Boxia. Of course, this card's an SR, so it's easy to get. On summon, you bounce cards in your opponent's field back to the, I think it's back to the deck, actually. Yeah, you spin them back to deck up to the number of different attributes of worms used for its summon. So it'll either be 1 or 2, realistically, because it'll either be Moyi in a token or Tai in a token. So 1 or 2 cards, spin them back to deck, which is huge. And then it can also pop a card in your field to special summon any level 4 or lower monster back from your graveyard. Very handy card, really nice to have, especially going second, spinning a bunch of cards back to deck. Super great. Then you've got Draco Berserker of the TENYI as a generic level 8 synchro monster. Most importantly, it is a worm synchro monster, which means that you can utilize it after using your Ashuna. Most commonly, you're going to be using this card with like an Adara and a Vishuda as a post-combo additional card. So if you have this card, absolutely play it. This card's nuts. If it destroys, basically, if it destroys an effect monster by battle, it can gain attack points permanently equal to that monster's attack points, and it can attack another monster during that turn. If your opponent activates a monster effect, you can also quick effect banish that monster. So again, it's interruption. It's really powerful OTK potential. It's a monster that can be summoned under the Ashuna lock. What's not to love? Draco Berserker is pretty much next to mandatory. And the last one that's kind of like next to mandatory is Dragite. Dragite then, if you have a Water Engrave, negates Spell or Trap once per turn and destroys it. Very, very powerful, especially in a metagame filled with stun, filled with really powerful spells and traps in general. So yes, Dragite's insane, really easy to summon, and you're playing a shitload of water monsters, so you're always going to have one engraved, the Rocket's effect. It can also, thanks to the fact we're playing Nibiru, once per turn, flip the top 5 cards of your deck face up, and if there happens to be a rock among them, you spin that number of cards, a number of cards equal to the number of rocks revealed, back to your opponent's hand. Which is great. It's removal, it's negates, it's easy to summon, what's not to love? And it's huge, 3k attack, why not? And that covers all the sort of like pseudo-mandatory ones, and from here, it's totally sort of flex. Yazi, I know a lot of people consider Yazi to be super core. I don't use it enough for me to call it core. I use it, right, and the circumstances in which it comes up and is useful are really good. It is an SR. There is no reason for you not to play this card. But I mean, to call it mandatory would be a stretch. It does definitely fix a lot of hands and fixes a lot of situations, and it's a good one to play, and that's why I'm playing it, obviously. But yeah, basically what it does is it can pop itself and another card in the field, or more specifically, sorry, you can target a Yang Zing monster you control and a card your opponent controls and destroy both. But, like, this is the only one you play. And if this card does end up getting destroyed, probably by its own effect, you then get to special summon any worm from your deck in defense. So easy way to summon out the likes of Taya or SWORDSOUL from your deck. Really useful going second. The only thing that makes it like not core or not mandatory is its level. Level 7 is sometimes awkward to get into. It's not super common that you're going to end up summoning this guy all the time. But yeah, there are ways of doing it. For example, SWORDSOUL Emergence can, if this card is banished, can increase or decrease the level of a monster by 1, which means that you can use Taya to go into this guy. By banishing Emergence to summon your token, reduce Taya by 1, there's your 7. You can use Adara plus your Long Wand to go into it, so it's not as if there's 0 possibilities, it's just not super common. Tri-Edge Master, this guy is basically just here for in a situation where you've got a Ringowurm and a level 4 on board, you can go into the Tri-Edge Master to just start drawing cards, right? It's a nice way to chain up into a level 8 synchro, especially alongside the likes of Shifana. Like, you can special Shifana, normal the Ringowurm, synchro off in the Tri-Edge Master, draw your card, and then your Ringowurm will special summon out a token, and then your token and your Tri-Edge Master will bring out something else. Not Grandmaster, because it requires a Worm non-tuner, but maybe like a Dragite or Draco Berserker. I mean, Dragite will be able to use its effect because you have Water Engrave. So it's not like the most useful thing in the world, and again, I don't summon it very often myself. You don't have to play Tri-Edge Master either. You can totally play Stardust Charge Warrior in the spot. I only play Tri-Edge Master because I have it, right? It's originally I was testing out Chaos Angel in the deck, which ended up just being cringe, so I took it out. You can play Chaos Angel in this deck, so you can. You can't get its full effects, but you can play it. It's just very fucking awkward. And yeah, so I wouldn't waste your time. I would just leave it as it is, accept that it's not going to happen. You can play Stardust Charge Warrior here if you want to. They do the exact same thing, basically on summon, draw a card. It's that simple. Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend, generic level 8 synchro monster. Once per turn, destroy all face-up special summoned effect monsters on the board with 3,000 or less attack points, and inflict 500 points to your opponent for each damaged card. Nice bird, nice board wipe, nice art, love this card, why not play it? And what else have we got? I think lastly then, the Lulu Wallowith. So Lulu Wallowith, Lulu Wallowith, or whatever the fuck its name is, right? Lulu. This card's interesting. It's definitely a neat card, but I feel like, I don't know. It does technically sort of give you interruptions, right? So if a card leaves the extra deck, all monsters you control gain 500 attack permanently, and then you negate the effect of a monster on the field until the end of the turn, of a face-up card in the field. So that's useful, right? Because if your opponent's playing shit from the extra deck, this is a negate, right? So your opponent special summon stuff from their extra deck, Despian, Lulu, Wallolith will negate that monster, which is neat, right? It's not something you're going to use very often. It's like end phase effect doesn't really come up very often. It can special summon out a Ecclesia from your deck, I guess, which is kind of useful sometimes, maybe. It's not going to come up super often though, but it's just realistically for level 12 synchro, your choices are Despian, Lulu, Wallolith, or Final Sigma. Right, so those are your two choices. Pick whichever one you like more. Sigma's definitely a lot more aggressive. It can also, however, I don't know if I prefer this card or not, right? So I feel like if I'm going as far as going into a level 12 synchro, I'm going into a level 12 synchro that I feel like is going to get me out of an otherwise game-ending situation. And Final Sigma is a little bit better for that, in my opinion, because he's much harder to deal with for your opponent because he's unaffected by other card effects, and he's also bigger. So while Lulu Wallolith is I would say a more generically useful card, like if you could just summon a level 12 as a regular part of your combo, yeah, 100%, I would say this card's better. However, the circumstances in which you find yourself wanting to summon a level 12 synchro are usually not optimal circumstances, and you normally just want an end-all be-all out to your opponent's shit, and that, I feel like, is Sigma more often than it is not. But you can do with that information what you will. Take a level 12, you want at least one of them, and whichever one you pick, be happy with, right? Lastly, Shaman of the TENYI, really powerful card. Discard a card, special summon a worm back from grave, especially powerful in combination with the likes of Taya. So basically you can discard a card, special summon a Taya from grave, Taya do its shenanigans. So this card is really good recursion, especially considering how easy it is to summon in a lot of circumstances. Any two worms will bring this card out, so love it. Plus it's royal, fucking fight me. Yeah, so what, the only change I would consider making to this deck that didn't actually even really occur to me as I was building it and never actually came up during the gameplay was the inclusion of the Psychic End Punisher. Very, very, very niche card, definitely not two of it. If you wanted to include it, I would maybe drop my Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend and I would include the Psychic End Punisher, simply because, again, if you have a Sword Soul monster on board, you summon out the token, then they somehow pop the monster, and then you've just got a dead token on your field. Well, you can special summon out one of your Tenyis here, and then synchro it off to go into Psychic End Punisher. Because the one thing about the tokens is, so long as you control a Sword Soul token, you can only synchro summon. You cannot link summon from the extra deck, so it may lock you out of certain plays. Sometimes wiping out the token is better. And then to give you the most number of circumstances in which it's not going to pose a problem, I think Psychic End Punisher is definitely going to be an important piece of that particular puzzle. But yeah, like I said, it never came up during this gameplay at least. In the long run, it likely will. So for those watching, I would definitely recommend including the Psychic End Punisher in place of any particular extra deck monster you don't have. But yeah, that's everything. I realize I've been talking about this deck a lot. This is one of the longest deck profiles I've done in a while. I just have a shitload to say about this deck, man. It's so fun. I just love it. But that's everything I've got to say on this. If you got any input, any questions, anything else, throw them in the comments down below, or you can hop into the Discord to ask us directly to get more direct feedback. But either way, I've said everything I need to. Check out the videos on screen now if you want to get more deck lists, deck profiles from myself based upon a number of different decks that we play here. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.